Captain America: The Winter Soldier is the best Marvel Studios film ever produced. That's not my opinion. That is a fact. Okay, that is my opinion, but I've always wanted to go through this film and talk about why it stands out as a very special installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Whenever I write something for the Armoured Skeptic channel, I usually want my video to have a point, or at least offer a unique perspective, or maybe give you some new insight to which you've never been exposed before. And the only point I have to make about Captain America: The Winter Soldier is, it's good. You should watch it. But I think that when I explain why I love this film so much, it will give you a bit of an appreciation for the story. The point is that the story is based on reality. Real, gritty, behind-the-scenes government stuff that doesn't really get discussed much in the mainstream. But these are issues that I know you've heard about before. And I know that this is going to sound crazy, but my motivation for making this video is that I have experienced in my own life a lot of the things that Captain America experiences in this film. And I also know people in the system that are affected by the things that the Winter Soldier film explores. And with how real this film gets in its discussion of the secret government activities that happen in the United States, I think it's kind of amazing that this film was produced at all. And even more surprising that it's a Disney Marvel Studios production. How did Disney even allow this film to get made in the first place? You've probably heard me say in the past that the original Iron Man film is my favorite of the Marvel Studios films. And I still think that it's one of the better installments in the series, but there is some cheesy stuff in Iron Man, like the cringy love scenes. The interactions between Pepper Potts and Tony Stark cause me physical pain. And there are some issues in Iron Man that are created by low-budget drawbacks, like a few boring sets and backdrops. And there are a few confusing directional choices, like Pepper Potts standing outside of the power plant and basically doing nothing during the entire climax of the film, despite her proximity to danger. Like, what are you doing just standing in the middle of the parking lot? Move, lady! But in my opinion, as simple as the film is, Iron Man almost still holds up today. For the most part. However, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, produced by Sony, is the best superhero film featuring a Marvel character of all time. I was actually going to mention Spider-Man 2 in my History is a Lie series when I was discussing apocalypse imagery in art. The hero, the Spider-Man, protector of the Earth, fights against a tentacle monster who creates a second sun that almost destroys the Earth. If you've watched my Apocalypse two-parter, then you'll understand what that means. Spider-Man 2 has a lot of Jesus imagery in it as well. The most obvious example is when the hero saves dozens of people on a runaway train by stretching out his arms in a feat of strength. Great scene, highly recommend this one. Spider-Man 2 has never been topped, except of course by Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, which is the single best superhero film ever produced, period. With deep character exploration of Batman and a heavy focus on drama, Dark Knight is really more of a crime film than it is a proper superhero film. Batman and his gadgets really just serve as garnish for an otherwise conventional detective drama about a psychopath's plan to destabilize the city of Gotham. Now, as for the Captain America series, well, I've talked quite a bit about all of the Captain America films in the past on my old movie review channel, Armoured Media. I want to sort of put my whole Marvel movie review career to bed here. I do miss the fun of Armoured Media though. I was always very hyperbolic about my opinion of films. I almost never gave my serious opinion. And I was sort of just upset at how lazy they were when they could have been just with little tweaks a little bit better. It's now time that I give my actual serious opinion of these films. No hyperbole, no characters, no gimmicks, nothing. Just me and you and my honest opinion.
Hey, boss.
What did I just say? The first Avenger, Captain America. I'd be lying if I said that I gave any craps about Captain America. As a Canadian, there's not even any novelty in this character for me. I guess I sort of appreciate the World War II aspect. And I think that if anything saves this film, it's the setting. Because I sort of just love war films. And it plays with that. It flirts with the idea of being a war film. And there is some gritty, realistic war stuff in it. But then it very quickly turns to schlock once the enemies develop these like laser weapons. I think I really like the first half of this. But after Captain America finally really gets into fighting Hydra, I sort of glaze over a little bit. And the character, like I said, as a Canadian, I don't care about Captain America. But this is one of the better films, arguably, from an objective standpoint. There are very few flaws. The characters are all really interesting, and the acting is really good. Tommy Lee Jones is in it, for Christ's sake, so I can't imagine I'm ever gonna watch it again. Garbage. Big game changer for me. The Winter Soldier. I take back everything I said about not caring about Captain America. This film made me care about Captain America, made me care about Bucky Barnes. This, I feel like, is objectively the best film in the entire series. It's the one that takes itself the most seriously. It's the one where the stakes are the most realistic and have the most weight. And again, it's real-ish people against real-ish people, more or less. I mean, they have superpowers, but it's like such a muted version of superpowers that it's not really much different from like a James Bond movie. This is definitely one of the few I would watch again. I think maybe if any of them I would watch again, it would be this one. So this is in the keep pile, recommend pile. This is the one I already reviewed before, Captain America Civil War. If you noticed, and didn't even take it out of its package, I really just don't like this film at all. It just felt gratuitous. It totally ignored and ruined the tone of Winter Soldier. I like the thing about trying to redeem Bucky. That's an interesting idea. And I guess I like some of the internal politics thing about the argument between whether or not we should register with the UN or whatever the hell it was that they were doing. But it mishandled it a little bit. I remember the first time that I watched the film, I was not totally convinced I understood why Captain America and Tony Stark were at odds with each other, why it really came to the point where they were literally fighting each other. If I have to give this movie points for one thing, though, is the score. Maybe even one of the best compositions in the entire series. I already talked about how much I hate this film and how it basically made me stop watching Marvel movies for a really long time. So I have to put it in the garbage. Avengers 1. Oh no. Okay, the poll quote here. The best superhero movie of all time. Chuck Walton, Fandango.com. This movie came out like 4 years after Dark Knight. You're a goddamn liar, Chuck Walton. I probably won't ever watch this movie again. It's a little too goofy. It's a little too dumb. And I really hate Captain America's costume in it. Oh man, just like my least favorite character. But yeah, Keeper, even though I'll probably never watch it again. Infinity War. Everyone loved this. I hated it. This doesn't even qualify as a film, as far as I'm concerned. It just sort of stops at the end. It doesn't even have like a really proper ending. Everything in the film sort of leads up to that big fight scene at the end, but it doesn't really build up to it. My biggest problem with this film is, once again, Captain America. Again, my bias is I don't care about the character at all. He's a really good example of why I think this film doesn't work. So when he shows up, he doesn't have his shield. He's got a beard and long hair, looking sexy as ever. Yeah, okay, it's cool that Captain America's back on the team after spending some time on hiatus, you know? But it seems like his character is sort of gonna have an arc, but he doesn't at all. His character doesn't do anything. When he finally shows up to Wakanda, the Black Panther's like, give this man a shield. And then they show him putting on 2 shields, and they've got like robotic parts, and they like expand and have spikes at the end, and it just seems like it's going to be significant. When the final fight scene comes up, he and Black Panther are like sprinting down the field, and they're running towards all these CGI monsters, and it's just like, oh crap, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do? What's Captain America gonna do? And after all that buildup, all that focus on him getting these new shields and him being ready for the fight, he just punches a bunch of guys. Just felt like he didn't need to be in the movie at all. And like, isn't he the main character of the team, the leader of the team? And it just seems like he didn't have to be there. That's a horrible mistake to make in what's supposed to be like the first half of the climax of the entire series. I wanted to do a review of Infinity War just so that I could make the joke. Infinity War was the first movie ever to feature a poster with infinity people on it. There's not really much else I actually liked about this film. And I'm skipping it, garbage pile. Sorry if you liked it, but you're wrong. But part 2 is significantly better. It is, in fact, a film. It has a beginning, middle, and end. Captain America has an arc. He's redeemed. He picks up Thor's hammer, which I know is something that happens in the comics. So that was cool to see that, I guess. But what I didn't like about it was the time travel crap. I think that revisiting old scenes from previous movies is the cheapest, laziest thing they could have done. And it's sort of insufferable to me. So I have to put this one in the garbage pile too. Sorry, nerds. Though I've briefly reviewed the Captain America films before, I've never really broken down the story of the Winter Soldier or what makes it the best of all of the Marvel Studio films. I am making this video because I am compelled to discuss this with my YouTube audience. And though you might not care, Winter Soldier is not really the best made superhero film. I'll admit it. Hell, it's not even the best produced Marvel film. I likely enjoy the Winter Soldier because of how contrary it is to the regular Marvel Studios film formula. Yes, it suffers from several flaws. The cinematography especially is extremely dull and uninspired. This might have more to do with how little time Disney gives their directors to plan their films in pre-production, but the cinematography is terrible. It's mostly filmed flat and wide with lots of shot reverse shot compositions. The sets and locations are dull too, and the cameras do almost nothing to bring them to life. The hospital scenes in particular are completely boring in the way that they're framed. I know that hallways are a difficult place to film, but holy shit, dude. So many scenes are shot like a low-budget made-for-TV movie. But the cinematography is serviceable, I guess, and it's not really all that distracting to the story. I just wish that it was better. One of the best parts of The Winter Soldier is that it's almost a perfect standalone film, which is the mark of a good sequel, and really makes it stand out from all the other Marvel films. One of the most insulting things Marvel films do is stop the movie dead to tease some bullshit that's coming up in a future film. Like in Age of Ultron, when everyone's going through massive character development at Hawkeye's cabin, Thor just straight up leaves the group so that he can play Hot Tub Time Machine. Winter Soldier does nothing like that. The only thing that's not perfectly set up in The Winter Soldier is Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. The film does mention him in an exposition scene when Steve Rogers goes to a Captain America exhibit at the Smithsonian, but the scene doesn't focus on Bucky Barnes properly or his personal importance to the hero. So when the film reveals later that Bucky Barnes is the Winter Soldier, it doesn't land that that well if you haven't seen the original film. I'd say that that's the most blatant flaw in the movie. There is a flashback depicting Steve and Bucky as young friends in the 1940s later in the film, in a scene that's depicting the hero's internal conflict about having to fight his old friend. If they had inserted a similar flashback scene in the first act of the film to really establish their friendship properly, that would have made it much more clear as to who Bucky Barnes was exactly and how important he was to the hero. Showing us a picture of Bucky's face and showing us how sad that makes Captain America doesn't really count. So the film opens up with the introduction of a new character, Sam Wilson. Steve Rogers is running laps around this guy by the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C., warning Sam that he's on his left every time Steve passes. It's a good gag and a fun way to communicate to the audience that Captain America is a superhuman. They share a little dialogue at the end, setting up their characters as former military members with combat experience. And just as we get to know Sam a little, Black Widow drives into the scene and picks Steve up. She makes a joke about the hero being a fossil, reminding the audience that he's a lot older than he looks because he was frozen in ice for 70 years. And she drives them away to the first action scene in the film as Captain America, Black Widow, and a SHIELD strike team infiltrate a hijacked ship in the middle of the ocean. I think that what makes this film so special in the Marvel Studios lineup is how grounded it is in reality. That's probably why I believe this is the best Marvel movie. Yes, Captain America has superpowers. Yes, he can do lots of things that normal people cannot do, like jump out of a plane without a parachute, run really fast for extended periods of time, throw his shield and ricochet it off of walls to hit opponents with perfect precision, and outfight basically any normal soldier in hand-to-hand combat. But even though the film makes a spectacle out of his super abilities, Steve's feats are not over-the-top superhero schlock like in Thor or Doctor Strange. Steve Rogers is still just a guy. He's an everyman, and he doesn't really do a lot of things that are physically impossible. I think it comes off as the perfect power fantasy for adults. So the captain moves through the ship quickly and efficiently, takes out the entire deck crew with barely a hiccup, along with some combat with Black Widow. This is one of the best action sequences in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. I wish that we got a lot more of this in the Disney Marvel lineup, and I think that this is also the film that Scarlett Johansson does her best job. I would have to bring up Scarlett Johansson in Iron Man 2. She was probably the best part of Iron Man 2. And they were teasing around that time, well before Captain America 2 came out, that they were going to give her her own film. And I was actually pretty excited about that, because one of the best action sequences in the entire Marvel series is in Iron Man 2, and it's when Scarlett Johansson's running down a hallway and beating up a bunch of guys with her skills and her tech. And it's all juxtaposed with Happy in a boxing match with just one guy. It's very clever, well done. And that's when we get into the next problem that I have with Marvel movies and superhero movies in general. The lack of sort of punch to the action. And a lot of that, the physics, it comes down to the fact that a lot of the villains, and even now a lot of the good guys, their powers are just colorful lights come out of their hands. What made Iron Man cool is that it was a guy in a suit. He didn't have powers, and he wasn't fighting against anybody supernatural. Nobody has powers in the film. It's just a guy in a tank suit fighting tanks. It feels like there's some real weight to that. Age of Ultron. This is underrated, but this also starts to really exemplify some of those problems that I have, where there's a weightlessness to the attacks that heroes do. This is where Scarlet Witch shows up, and her powers are literally she shoots red things out of her fingers. I really hate magic as a superpower, and I remember that was my biggest problem with Suicide Squad, is that they were going up against magic, and there's just never really clear rules about what that means. Like, you never really know what's stopping somebody with magic from doing something you're as an audience member thinking like, oh, why don't you just do this? But then you're never really sure what the limit is, because sometimes they'll do things that just seemed outside of the range of what they had done before. And they're just like, well, she's just discovering her powers, and it just seems dumb to me. Doctor Strange. This one is 100% the biggest problems I have with Marvel films, and that's the inconsequential nature of superpowers being magic. You just have these fancy lights come out of your fingers and they do whatever the hell you want them to do. Like, that's not entertaining to me. It feels like there's no weight to it. Feels like there's no tension. Just anything wacky can happen. Ooh, they're running on the side of a building, and oh, now the building's folding in on itself. And it's like, the visuals are neat, but it's just like crap. Just waves of meaningless crap. Garbage pile. There are some Marvel films that balanced the over-the-top hero action and the more down-to-earth action really well. Captain Marvel had a lot of good action, for example, like the passenger train scene. That's executed perfectly. There's enough of that in Captain Marvel, I think, that when she finally obtains her full powers at the end of the film, it's not a visual overload like other Marvel films tend to fall into. I think that Captain Marvel is a really good film to use as a balanced comparison to Winter Soldier. Captain Marvel feels like a bigger movie with a larger scope. It has the best cinematography in the entire Marvel lineup, maybe better than any superhero film ever. It has some of the best visuals and CGI. It has the best makeup and costuming out of any Marvel film. And it's set in my favorite time period, the 1990s, with some of my favorite music. Captain America: The Winter Soldier fails against Captain Marvel in every one of those categories. From a technical perspective, The Winter Soldier is kind of frustrating, especially considering that The Winter Soldier had a slightly bigger budget. There's almost no excuse for that. Yet, with the smaller scope, The Winter Soldier stands as the best Marvel film to me because of the heavy focus on the characters. Their dramas and struggles are the most important part of a story. You can't cover up bad writing with amazing CGI. You can't cover up bland, boring characters with over-the-top special effects and music. That might work for the kids, but adults notice that. There are some sci-fi elements in Winter Soldier, though. Sam Wilson turns out to be a special type of airman that's trained to use a top-secret winged suit, just like Mothman. As unrealistic as his jetpack behaves in the film, the Falcon is one of the best parts of the movie. The visuals are amazing, and the Falcon is the best sidekick installment to the MCU. Sam is perfect, the way he interacts with the other characters is perfect, and the film leaves you with wishing that you just got a little bit more of him. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury is pretty damn good too. The scene where he fights off a bunch of police in Washington, D.C. is another one of my favorite sequences in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. A lot of fun. Again, there's some cool high-tech stuff involved in this scene, like a talking car, but it's still very much grounded in reality. Fury finally earns his badass persona in this film. I can't say enough good things about him here. The only time I think Nick Fury is better is, again, in Captain Marvel, when we meet him before he became the hard-headed, mysterious badass. And Nick Fury, it's great to see him before he turned into the ass. Samuel L. Jackson is legitimately a good actor. As far as I'm concerned, if he wasn't in this series, I wouldn't have taken it half as seriously. In my opinion, Sam L. Jackson basically carried the Marvel franchise. Black Widow plays the role of the chameleon in The Winter Soldier, acting as a bit of an antagonist towards the hero for the entire first half of the movie. So you end up getting a little bit angry with her a few times. This is really important to help you understand the story, though. Her aloof behavior and her unwillingness to be transparent with Captain America, this is exactly what this kind of thing is like in real life as well. Spoilers, but it turns out that S.H.I.E.L.D., the organization that our hero works for and thinks are the good guys, was infiltrated by Hydra, which represents the Nazis. This is true in real life as well. This is reflective of something that has happened in the real world since World War II. The Nazis have gone underground and have infiltrated every major organization in the United States, influencing them covertly. That's basically what this film talks about. How the CIA is an arm of the Nazi regime, and how they've managed to co-opt the American government and military since the 1940s. It's certainly not a subject that you'd expect they'd explore in a superhero film marketed as family entertainment, especially produced by Disney, not just because Disney tends to avoid heavy topics like this, but because Walt Disney himself was famously a Nazi supporter. So I don't even understand how this film was even greenlit at all, unless this is their way of secretly gloating that they're right under our noses and there's nothing that we can do about it. It's hard to say. So Black Widow acts suspiciously during the first act, doing things behind Captain America's back, making him frustrated. In the first action scene on the ship, she secretly downloads intelligence from the bridge without even telling Steve that that was one of her objectives. In fact, she almost compromises his mission when he has to save her from an exploding grenade. He later demands from her and Nick Fury that he be let in on what's going on, but he receives pushback instead, being told that everyone gets their own individual mission. Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. want Captain America to remain ignorant to the reality of the situation, which only makes Steve more frustrated. I heard that. To earn back Steve's trust, Nick Fury shows him part of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s secret plan, their effort to build 3 large air platforms with artillery designed to act as massive drones to take out every threat to American security. Captain America protests against their implementation, stating that this is not what he fought for in World War II. This is not freedom. His words fall on deaf ears as Fury is convinced that this is the future. Scary how real this part is. This was the precedents created under the Obama administration and has only gotten worse since his election. When faced with this sort of weapon, the obvious question is, how do we know that we can always trust the person with their hand on the trigger? And this film proves why normalizing things like drone strikes should never be okay. Sure, maybe we can trust the president that's in charge today, but when we create this sort of precedence, we open the door for a more nefarious leader in the future. So later in the film, when Nick Fury gets injured by the police attack in Washington, he gives that secret intelligence that was collected by Black Widow to Steve Rogers in a USB drive, telling him, "Don't trust anyone." Huh. I have a t-shirt that says that. Nick Fury gets shot again, so Steve Rogers then speaks to the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., who asks the captain if he knows why Fury visited Steve right before he died. Steve decided not to tell him, as per Fury's request, and in return, the S.H.I.E.L.D. strike team tries to arrest the captain in an elevator, leading to a really fun escape sequence. I love this scene. Both the fight in the elevator, as well as the escape across the bridge on his motorcycle, are just so damn cool. Right before that sequence, Steve temporarily hid the USB stick in a vending machine at the hospital, and when he did so, he told Black Widow that nothing was going on. In response, she said that he's a bad liar, and it's like, bitch, you're worse. Black Widow later finds the USB drive drive, and in that moment when she reveals to Steve that she possesses the USB drive, we don't know for sure if she's going to help the hero or hinder him. And we still don't understand why there are so many secrets. We don't even know why they tried to arrest Steve Rogers. Nobody's telling anybody anything. But the duo decide to trust each other and work together to figure out what's going on and why the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. organization appears to be imploding. Black Widow teaches Steve a few tricks to evade detection, like a cheeky little public display of affection that makes the S.H.I.E.L.D. strike team too uncomfortable to look at their faces as they pass by. The most telling part of her character came in the car ride to the old military base in New Jersey. Black Widow and Captain America are discussing their situation, and there's been an ongoing joke throughout the entire film where Widow keeps trying to hook Steve up with different women. He keeps turning all these suggestions down, implying that his issue is not that he doesn't think that he can get a woman. That's not the problem. So later in the car ride to New Jersey, Black Widow asks Steve what he wants her to be for him, almost implying that she could take the role of girlfriend as if it's just an aspect of her persona that she can simply slip into. She's like a special kind of agent, not like a spy, but more like an influencer. Like she can honeypot men, for example. So when she asks Steve what he needs her to be for him, he replies, "How about a friend?" She smiles as if he's being naive and says, "You're in the wrong line of work." This is maybe the most revealing moment for Black Widow's character in the entire MCU. She's basically saying here that in her world, she can't have friends. There's no such thing as friends when you're a spy. She can't be real because nobody is real for her. This is why she's always so aloof, why she always acts so cool, calm, and collected even under pressure. She never reveals herself because she has never trusted a human before. She was willing to be Captain America's girlfriend because that's just fun for her, but being a friend would mean getting too close to him. One of the women that Black Widow suggested that Steve ask out was a neighbor of his, a nurse. This is the only woman that he actually ends up offering to have coffee with, but she ends up turning him down. Only a few moments later, we discovered that this strawberry blonde woman who was closest to him was actually an undercover agent that was ordered to move in next door to Captain America to keep an eye on him. The main theme in this film is discovering that everything and everyone around the hero is fake. Nothing is real. Nobody is real. Everything is a lie. Every single one of the hero's beliefs is structured off of a false premise, and Steve struggles to come to terms with this throughout the entire story. I wish that I could tell you how similar this was to my own life experience. At the end of the film, when S.H.I.E.L.D. dissolves, there's a montage showing where all of our favorite characters end up afterwards. Agent Maria Hill, for example, ends up taking a job with Stark Industries. Nick Fury burns his identity and goes on the lam. And the fake nurse that lived next door to Steve Rogers takes a job with the CIA. That is supposed to be a hint. This is telling us that the entire film was about the CIA. We were always talking about the CIA the entire time. Just as Hydra represents the Nazis, S.H.I.E.L.D. represents the American intelligence community. Later in the story, when Captain America and Black Widow arrive in New Jersey, they find a secret underground bunker that's holding a massive Cold War-era computer. They boot it up to discover that it's housing the mind of a villain from our first Captain America film, a Nazi scientist. Or a Hydra scientist, whatever. The old Nazi tells us that Steve was born on the 4th of July, 1918, and then turns to Black Widow and says that she was born in 1984. Hey, That's when I was born. Then he explains to the heroes that he and several other Hydra members were brought to America by the United States government during Project Paperclip, which was a very real thing that actually happened in real life. Project Paperclip was an effort from the United States government to gather up Nazi scientists and repatriate them into the United States so that they could be used to create technology and weapons to use against the Soviets. Wernher von Braun, the father of the American space age and the founder of NASA, was a Nazi. The entire American space program is still riddled with lies and misdirections today based on the lies created by the Nazis in the 1940s and 50s. NASA is a propaganda wing of the United States government. So this Nazi computer character just used the term 1984 and the phrase Project Paperclip in the same scene. And just as he disseminates this information to the heroes, a missile hits the bunker and buries them under rubble. And they're saved only by Steve's strength and his invincible star shield. Oh, and the Winter Soldier, the entire point of this film. The Winter Soldier was Steve Rogers' best friend growing up back in the 1920s and 30s before the war even started. Well, Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, was brainwashed and was used by a secret Hydra program operating out of the Soviet Union. Russia also had a similar program to Project Paperclip in the 1940s, which the Russians called Operation Osovietkum, and the film implies that Hydra Nazis in Russia work hand in hand with Hydra Nazis in the United States. Again, this is exactly like real life. Even though the technology that they created in the United States and Russia was used against each other, those Nazi agents in either nation remained secret friends, part of the same secret society the entire time. This is why Russia and the United States always appear to have this bizarre homogeny with each other, even when they're acting like enemies. During the space race, they told the same lies. During the Cold War, they told the same lies. And today, they tell the same lies, yet posture themselves as enemies of each other. Watch my video, Mothman Was a Russian Spy, for some elaboration on how Russia and the United States were competing to out-lie to each other, and how they were competing to out-lie to us, the public. They were never able to expose each other's lies, because if they had done so, they'd be admitting how they were also lying to their own citizens. Later in the film, when they ask a Hydra agent how they were going to pick their targets with the drone system, he claims in the modern era, it's really easy to pick a target, because everything is digital today. Everyone's statistics are recorded, from your SAT scores and test scores in school, to your credit standing, even how good a driver you are. All of that information can be collected on one database. He's basically describing a social credit score much like they have in China. Yes, China makes their social credit program extremely obvious because China implements immediate consequences for having a low social credit score. And if you think that just because we don't see those immediate consequences in the West, that means that they're not recording that same information about our social credit, then you are deluded. Captain America's best friend and his girl were both being used by the system, and at the end of the film, he helps them get out of it. At the end of the film, Black Widow goes her own way, and the Winter Soldier disappears. And Steve Rogers is left alone with his new imaginary friend who has wings. So, in conclusion, that is why I believe Captain America: The Winter Soldier is the best Marvel Studios film, and I recommend that you watch it. In fact, Winter Soldier is so great that it's almost as good as Wonder Woman.